Welcome back. So all I've done since the last video is just tidied up the UVs a little bit, and I've also UV'd the branches. Now looking at the scene now, it looks exactly the same as it did when we started UVing before, which is absolutely fine. But what we're looking for now is the stuff underneath the surface, those UVs all laid out and ready to be painted on and played around with. If we go into this scene here, what you see is I've just baked these branches together just to give me, again, a rough idea of the composition. They're not going to be the ones that I'm actually going to use. If we go to our UV editor, you'll see that these haven't had any UVing on them just yet. What I've done is created 3 variations of the branches, which you can see here, and I've put all those on the same UV page. Now it was important just to do one branch initially and UV it, and then I tweaked that and adjusted it to create these variations, and that just meant that the UVs were already done. They just needed a little bit of tweaking to adjust them to the new shapes. But what I have there is 3 branches that I can sculpt in ZBrush, then bring back into Maya, and then we've got a little bit of variation in the scene. If I just look here, we just select the body, we've got the head, the scarf and the body there, and as I said before, I've just cleaned up the scarf, made it a lot more uniform and rigid with the shape, and that's just going to help when we're baking out the textures later. The head's a little bit bigger and the scarf's at the top, and the body, they've all been tweaked and adjusted. Yes, there are elements of this page where there's texture space which needs to be used, and if you're going to texture the eyes, you could put the eyes on here as well. The stitches, if you want to go in and texture those, you could add those on here too. And there may be some other elements of this scene that you want to add. You could just squeeze it all into this texture page. But as this is an illustration, I'm not too concerned about wasting texture space. It's not like it's a real-time or a game asset where every pixel counts. So that's absolutely fine for what we're going to be using it for. So let's just, before I just skip on, just have another look at the snake UVs again. Just tidied those up using the align tools just to make them a little bit more even, but they've not changed much since the previous video. So there, we're at a stage now where we are pretty much thinking, right, the models are done, well, the base models are done, we've added UV, so let's get those into ZBrush. And all I'm going to do now is basically, if we take the body as an example, let's just isolate those. If we turn off smooth mesh, you can see that it looks very angular. Ideally what we want to do, well, if I just go to the UVs as well, so the UVs are still quite angular, and yes, we could export this, take it into ZBrush, and use, when we apply subdivisions, use the smooth UV tool. But I find with ZBrush the UVs actually contract as well. It doesn't sort of smooth the UVs in a similar way to Maya. And at this stage in the project, I'm not sure whether I'm going to use these base meshes and then export just the texture data from ZBrush, or whether I'm going to export the models from ZBrush as well and just use everything there and replace these. So I want to give myself a little bit of flexibility. Now it may be that somebody else is working on the models and then on your project, and somebody else is working on the textures. So if that's the issue, you know, then maybe you do have to stick with their base models. So if you want to try and keep the UVs, what we want to do is bake in a subdivision before we export. And all I'm going to do is just go to Mesh, Smooth, and ideally we want the UVs, let's just select the head for now. We want the UVs to remain the same as they are here. So it's a good idea when baking this, let's just open up the attribute editor as well, just running out of a bit of space here. If you remember before, we adjusted the open subdiv controls, which controlled how the UVs were smoothed. I think we had it set to preserve edges previously, which just smoothed those out like so. But you may want to just keep that angular bit there. It's completely up to you. But basically, the point I'm trying to get across is the settings here, you also need to add in to your smooth tools here. So basically, vertex boundary, sharp edges and corners, UV boundary, preserve edges and corners too. So when this smooths your model, it's going to match the options you've got in here. Now we could just add one subdivision, we could add two, it's entirely up to you, but if I just add one in, you can see it's just retained the smoothness of the UV boundary. And I can turn off smooth mesh, as you can see, if I just press 3. So when we take this into ZBrush and apply a further subdivision, it's not going to have that much effect on the UVs here, because there's quite a lot of geometry, so there's not a lot of it to relax, if you sort of get what I mean. I mean, you may have a different approach to this, but this is just what I like doing, just to give me more flexibility. So now we've done the head, we can just go in and apply the same to the body and the scarf. So there, we've got those models, and then all we need to do now is just export those as an OBJ, and then we can start bringing those models into ZBrush and then start investigating sculpting. So that's it for Maya for now. Once you get to this stage, like I say, export your models, and then what we'll do in the next video is bring those into ZBrush, and start sculpting in those details.